Welcome to Equipping Leaders, a podcast where I share and discuss resources, tools, and information to equip leaders to build creative, cohesive teams through culture and leader development. Welcome to the Equipping Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Natasha, and today I am going to talk about the ability and authority to make important decisions. No one can argue that Dwight Eisenhower was responsible for making some pretty huge decisions that not only impacted his career and personal life, but that impacted the world. While most of us will not have to contend with decisions that have that kind of scope, as leaders, we need to be aware of the impact of our decisions and their second and third order effects, meaning how many levels of people, environments, and other decisions do our decisions impact. Dwight Eisenhower was essentially the CEO behind D-Day. Each decision that was made that would result in the success or failure of Operation Overlord was informed by multiple sources and trusted individuals, but was ultimately the responsibility of Ike. He dealt with some of the biggest decisions that the world had ever seen and that have ever been shouldered by one person. Like I said earlier, we do not make decisions that will save or change the world usually, but the decisions we make are important for reasons that are both known and unknown. Jack Welch, as CEO of General Electric, supported shifting the culture to one of creating great managers. Crotonville, originally established in 1956, got a ton of resources, both in finances and attention, and ended up becoming one of the world's best internal leader development institutes. Many of the leaders who went through the institute not only led well within General Electric, but they were also renowned leaders when they left the organization to lead elsewhere. Since Crotonville had been around for so long, it could have been easy for Jack Welch to dismiss it or not put additional focus on it. But instead, he made the decision to not only support it, but to support it as a means to improve the leadership culture and mindset at General Electric. Some decisions are easier, and they can result in a win-win scenario for those involved and those on the outskirts. But the main reason why certain decisions are made at higher levels is due to the necessity for more professional maturity and experience. Some decisions are heavy and can evolve, devolve, or revolutionize an organization, even if that was not the original intent. In the famous book, The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood wrote about change and evolution, and one of the characters made the statement, "Better never means better for everyone. It always means worse for some." Leaders must be aware of their decision-making power and impact. We no longer live in a time when our personal and professional lives are compartmentalized. That mentality of it's only business or leave your personal life at home are no longer the standard, which is a really great thing. When leaders make decisions, they need to consider the projects, decisions, and environment that are impacted. But most importantly, the people. People will always be affected by your decisions, so it's important to consider as much information as you can without delaying a decision for too long when making a decision. I once had a leader who would ask for the input of as many people across the organization as possible, regardless of their position in the hierarchy or their perceived experience. Some people did not like this, and they thought that because she was a senior person in a senior role, that she should just make these decisions. However, she was notoriously one of the best decision makers because not only did she have a lot of information, but she could see the decision from multiple angles and had talked with the people who would be impacted by it. So she also had a face to put on those decisions. As leaders, especially the higher up we are, the less we see the faces of those who are impacted. In past episodes, Mark Stammer and Christopher Hartley both said that you have to get out of your office and walk around so you can really understand and know your people. When you know who is actually impacted by your decisions, you'll be more considerate and thoughtful when you're making them. It's also important to trust others to make decisions, big or small. Colin Powell would tell a story about when he was the United States National Security Advisor under President Ronald Reagan, and he was responsible for making a big decision. In his book, It Worked for Me, he told this story. He said, "I used to sit in front of the fireplace in the Oval Office with the president. We were in a tough situation and he was paying no attention. So I talked louder and longer about the need to solve the problem. And he kept looking over my shoulder, and I could not think of anything else to say. Finally, he says, "Colin, look, the squirrels came and got the nuts in the rose garden this morning." So I left the Oval Office wondering what that was all about. It finally struck me. He was saying, "I'll sit here as long as you want me to, as you tell me about your problem. But I'm going to sit here and look at the squirrels." What he was saying was, I trust you. I hired you because I believe in you. So you decide. And what's beyond that, you come see me. I love this story because every leader I have ever met loves to give advice and input. But when it comes to really doing our own jobs well and successfully delegating to others, there's a time and a place for that, but there's mostly a time for empowering others to do their work and make great decisions. When it comes to making decisions in the workplace, there is a standard 5-part framework that many people use. And what I like about it is that it's generic enough that it can be a great starting point for most decisions. So in step 1, you identify your goal or endpoint, right? What is the desired result? Step 2 is to gather relevant information. In that story I told about the leader who asked multiple people in the organization their thoughts on different scenarios and decisions, she was gaining real-world relevant information from people whose information would normally be very filtered by the time it reached her. It gave her the upper hand of having true information straight from the people who would be impacted. There are many ways you can gather relevant information. The most important part is to do your research in a way that best serves those who are impacted by your decisions. Step 3 is to evaluate your options, followed by making your choice in step 4. Finally, and perhaps one of the most important portions, is to evaluate your decisions, regardless of the outcome. Sometimes people do not evaluate a decision if the result was positive, but it's valuable to evaluate no matter what. I know I've said the phrase making big decisions a few times in this episode, but I also want to point out that while in Ike's case, Operation Overlord can be seen as a huge decision because it was, there are levels of subjectivity when considering decisions. When a decision will change your life, it's a big decision. But to someone who doesn't know you, that decision is inconsequential. Every decision is valuable to the person making it, responsible for it, and who will have to answer for it. When you encounter a decision to be made in your own life, on your own team, or within your own organization, look at examples from across history and across your industry. Things change over time, so of course the specifics will never be exact, but the lessons we can learn will give us more perspective on our decisions. Join me again next week when I share a conversation with Rob Massey, an acquisitions officer in the United States Army, on making decisions and how we can change the narrative on decisions and take responsibility for them, even when we do not want to be the ones who have to make the decision. Thank you for listening to this episode of Equipping Leaders. This season, there is an associated blog for each podcast episode, which can be found on my website, natashacheyenne.com, under Leadership Journal. My website also features other leadership development content, such as frameworks, book recommendations, a weekly newsletter, and other downloadable content. You can also follow me on Instagram at novel_Natasha and on Twitter and Facebook at Natasha Cheyenne. Join me next week for another episode.